My name is DJ Wildstyle, and over to it's on the, he's on this side for me is,
Oh, my name is Avram, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad that you are.
Happy to be
So
on your show, DJ Wild Style.
my show.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, no, today's show is actually about all of the amazing guests we have today. And I'm so excited because this is a topic that I think is important regardless. I mean, all of our topics are pretty important, but regardless of who you are, what even species you are, this this um this topic affects you. And
Yeah.
today we are talking about
Brrr. Oh, I forgot my
grrr.
sound effects. I'm going to call those up. We're talking about the environment. So you've been living in Omaha during the past few months during COVID, and you were telling me that the family you're living with is vegan and they have other lifestyle choices that they've made that you've learned from. I'd love for you to share with everyone some of the things that you're doing differently while living in Omaha.
Well, one of my cousins is vegan. The entire family here keeps kosher, but all of them really move forward in making less food waste is a big thing. We don't have food waste. We have like nights every week where we're just like eating leftovers. So food waste is a big thing in this household. We compost. We are encouraged in this family to make more vegan options, more sustainable. All of the products that they use are either vegan or cruelty free,
Uh-huh.
and those are just some of them. Like laundry, we all do our laundry together to reduce our water usage.
That's good.
They don't use their sprinklers for most of the year because over here it rains so much they don't even really need it, and they're
I've heard
fine
of
with.
rain.
You've heard of rain? It's, yeah, it doesn't happen that much back where we're from.
Um, and what of these practices do you think you could bring back with you when you come back to LA?
I'm definitely gonna focus on, so me as a person, I think that as I grow older it'll be easier um to make better options with what I choose to eat. But for now, even as a kid, I can try to encourage my family to make more good options for the environment when we go grocery shopping. So like uh, eggs that we know are from a company that treats their chickens well,
Mhm.
or if we do get meat, places that actually treat their animals well before. Um, we can try to start making some. I mean, I'm lactose intolerant anyways, so trying to, find replacements for cow's milk. I really like oat milk. I've been vibing with oat milk. I do recommend it for anybody on this call, unless you're allergic to oats. And please don't drink
I
oat milk.
vibe with cashew pea milk,
Okay,
which is
I'm gonna
not
need
what
to
it
try that.
sounds like. It's not a bunch of cashews peeing into a glass. It's cashews and peas. Just
Oh, okay. I was worried for a second. I was like, I mean, I'll try it since you said so. Yeah, that we already compost over at my house, but I think that another thing that we do over here that I want to try when we get back is we reuse our glass jars that our food comes in, and we use them for, like, we clean them out and we use them as containers rather than using plastic.
that's great.
Mhm.
I just was at a zero waste supermarket, which was really cool. They had no bags and no jar. Like you had to bring your own jars or your own bags to get the grain, the corn, the rice. It was a very cool concept. Zero waste supermarket. Well, it's now 4 o'clock, and we want to welcome everyone to IEIE, our final IEIE Inform, Elevate, Inspire, Engage of the year. And this topic is environmental justice. I don't know if you say environment or environment. Do you say environment?
I say environment, but
Okay.
I might, the way you say it sounds a lot fancier. So who knows?
It's French, the way I say it. I want to thank everyone for being here, and especially thank you to the Hebrew Union College, which is our sponsor for today. I am a graduate of the Hebrew Union College. I have a degree in Jewish education. Ask Me Sasha is also a graduate of HUC, Hebrew Union College. She has a degree in Jewish education and nonprofit management. And we are going to be joined by Rabbi Adam Allenberg, who is also a graduate of the Hebrew Union College. So it's an amazing place to go for graduate school if you want to get a doctorate degree, education degree, rabbinic degree, cantorial degree, or and share your love and passion for Judaism and with other people as a career. It ain't a bad career, I'll be honest. My name is Avram. As DJ Wildstyle said, I would like to explain what I look like. I am 6'3". You cannot tell because I'm sitting down. I am wearing a thrift shop shirt that new it cost like $120, fashionable, but it is cost me $8 at a thrift shop. That is a nice way to look snazzy and do something good for the environment. And it's a short sleeve button front shirt. I have dark hair and my part is on my right. That's what I look like for all the people who want to know. For today, we're going to meet with Rabbi Adam Allenberg, then the teen, sorry, there were two, now there's one. The teen from the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. And then we're going to meet with Lauren Kim from Yucca, which is an Evangelical Climate Action Youth Group. And then we'll bring it home with Repair the World with our friend Rabbi Jessy Dressin. And that'll be our day. All of our music can be found on Spotify. DJ Wildstyle curates these playlists. So find them on Spotify. They're really great. Listen. So on to our topic, environmental justice. I keep saying environmental. Raise your hand if you've seen The Lorax. Let me see. The movie The Lorax. And he is our first guest speaker, The Lorax. Wouldn't that be amazing if all of a sudden like animated Lorax says, hello, people from South America? I would love that. We're going to be there one day. But the Lorax, he's always screaming, I speak for the trees. So in this webinar, you know that the environment is important. You got that. Your generation, more than any other generation, does not need to be convinced that we need to take care of the environment. But how do we move from hashtags to action? From hashtags to action, we're really good at putting up a hashtag or a screen or reposting a meme, but how do we incorporate this in our lives? And one way to do that is to be the Lorax, to speak for the trees. And that can be really hard because when you say that, when you stand up for something and you're in the minority, that's really hard, right? If everybody was doing it, you wouldn't have to stand up for it, right? If everybody's doing it, you didn't have to stand up for it, but everybody's not doing it. Your school might not be, your synagogue might not be, your family might not be, and you have to be the Lorax. You have to be that squeaky wheel. You know why? Because if you only have a little bit of grease, which wheel is going to get that grease? That squeaky wheel. That is my wagon from when I was a kid. I found a photo of it. I wanted to show that to you. So squeaky wheel gets the grease. The Lorax as the one who saved the trees. How are you going to be a Lorax? How are you going to be a squeaky wheel and really change from, I really care about the environment. Oh, what do you do about that? I hashtag a lot. Can you imagine if that's just your response? The way you save the environment is hashtag? No. Go into your communities and make a difference and figure out even one small way that you can change your community. Here's a friend of ours, Greta Thunberg. Ladies and gentlemen, Greta Thunberg, surprise guest. She said on an interview with Trevor Noah, in my country, climate change is not something you believe in. It's a fact, right? So isn't that interesting that in our country, we're like, well, do you believe in climate change? Other countries, they're not having a discussion whether it's a matter of belief, right? Like climate change is happening and we need to do something about it. Trevor Noah asked Greta, it's a great interview. I recommend Googling Trevor Noah, Greta Thunberg interview. And he said, well, what should we do to save the environment? And she said, everything. We need to do everything. If we don't have the environment, we have nothing else. We're going to play a quick game. It's called, Can This Be True? Can this be true? Ready? More than 1 billion people worldwide do not have access to safe drinking water. This could be true. It is true. More than 1 billion people worldwide do not have access to safe drinking water. And if that's an issue that you care about, there's a lot of organizations that will help people with that issue. Okay, next question. Could this be true? Pollution is one of the biggest killers, affecting more than 100 million people worldwide. Could this be true? What do you think? Shall we tell them the answer? The answer is, it is true. Americans buy more than 29 million bottles of water every year, and only 13% are recycled. Now, maybe it was 11 and I wrote 13 to trick you. So I'm just putting that out there. Could this be true? This is 100% true. We only recycle 13% of recycled bottles. You might think that's a given. Isn't that a given that we should recycle bottles? Only 13% are recycled because people aren't near a recycling center, are lazy. I don't know. But plastic's a big problem. There's a big mass of plastic floating in the ocean right now, the size of Texas, where I first met Rabbi Adam Allenberg in Texas, not on that giant mass of floating plastic. That's gross. That's disgusting. That's upsetting. That's killing fish, birds. Birds, they're finding dead birds. They open up their stomachs and they're full of plastic. Could this be true? More than 3 million kids under the age of 5 die every year due to environmental factors. It is true. The US throws away enough plastic bottles in a week to encircle the earth 5 times. Could this be true? I don't know. Is this the one I'm tricking you on? Circle the earth 5 times? That's a lot of plastic. We throw that away? Y'all, that is true. I have 2 more. Could this be true? More than 1 million species are at risk of extinction because of climate change. Could that be true? 1 million species? I don't even think there's that many species in the world. How could that be true? It is true. Last one. Could this be true? Approximately 40% of the lakes in the US are too polluted for fishing, aquatic life, or swimming. 40% of the lakes. How could that be true? Like, maybe this is the one that's not true. Like 40% sounds like a lot. Could this be true? Luckily, we have a lot of lakes because this is true. This is true, y'all. And it's, so our work is cut out for us. And before we move on to Rabbi Adam Allenberg from the Hebrew Union College, our sponsor for today, I just want to say, like, you have power. We've talked about this a lot. You have circles of influence. Look at these circles of influence that you have. That's you in yellow. That's your smile. Does it look just like you? Looks just like you. You know it does. And that's your circles of influence. The school, your family, your synagogue, your neighborhood, your town. You have an influence in all these areas in the state. I'm not even going to like the country and the world. Like, you could have an impact calling your city councilman, calling your congressman, talking to your schools, your synagogues, your committees, forming a committee, joining a committee. If you're like, I care about the environment, if you say that, if that's something you say, then it's time to do something about it. And we're here to motivate you to make that happen. And I'm sure many of you are already doing amazing things. So it is now time to level up what our game right now and ask, what does Judaism say about this? I crack me up. Ladies and gentlemen, he is the Senior Director of Recruitment and Admissions at the Hebrew Union College, where he helps inspire Jewish leaders, pursues careers as social justice activists, change makers, educators, spiritual guides to Jews of all kinds. He lives in Santa Monica, California, with his wife, Lauren, his son, Eitan, daughter, Tamar, and their dog, Ella. He loves to hike, cook, sing, make kombucha, and hang out with really good people like me. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Adam Allenberg.
Hello, everyone. Is that the smooth transition into me taking things away?
That was so good.
I just want to name that I'm also drinking water out of a glass that's been reused. Palm Teas used to make these like amazing glasses, so we also reuse a lot in this house. Well, it's really nice to be with you all. I've joined this crew once or twice before, and I'm excited to speak a few words of Torah with you today. The challenge that Avram has given all of us, I think, is a challenge worth rising to. It begins with things like the glasses in your home, or the diet in your home, DJ Wild style, the vegan diet. So I want to offer a few rules, a sort of a way of thinking about it. Let's call them principles. Let's call them, wisdom that's been shared through the ages to respond to this urgent moment. And one of the things that I always like to remind people is we are the people of the library. We are more than just a book. There's a whole literature that tries to understand what does it mean to be a human being in the world. And these issues of climate change are fairly new to the Jewish tradition, but believe it or not, there's a ton of wisdom, and it starts with the book of Genesis. The first book, the book that many of us might have some experience with, the story of creation. We encounter this peculiar take on how the world maybe came to being. But here's what I want to offer is that in the second chapter, it says that God took the human and placed them or them, maybe more appropriately, in the Garden of Eden. And there's lots of ways of reading this next line, La'ovda u'lishomra. The Jewish Publication Society says it's to till it and to tend it. I like this translation, to work it and watch it. And maybe one that's well known by a lot of people on this earth, especially Christians in our midst, who read the King James Bible, to dress it and to keep it. We could argue about translation and all the ways to understand this phrase, but it's clear we're supposed to have some relationship of care over the earth. And our tradition goes even further and says, and I always know the danger of throwing just a bunch of text on the screen, but it's really important to me that people know that these aren't quotes. They're not pithy ideas. They're attached to a whole conversation that we have in Jewish life. So that text in Genesis is talking to this idea, centuries later. This is an idea that says when the Blessed Holy One created the first human, God took him and led him around the garden and said to him, "Look at my works, how beautiful and praiseworthy they are. And all that I've created, it was for you that I created it. Pay attention that you do not corrupt and destroy my world. If you corrupt it, there is no one to repair it after you." There's a sense within our tradition that this is a limited resource, and we have to be so careful about how we care for it. So much so that during wartime, when you might think things are most dire and we are most desperate, and maybe you would think the rules of war allow you to act however you might, because maybe the battlefield forgives or forgets. Even there, we're told that we don't cut down fruit-bearing trees to use against our neighbor, to use as shelter for ourselves. We are thinking about the next generation. It even says, aren't human beings, aren't you like the trees? Aren't you of them? So it says, would we cut them down? Would we bring them to ruin? This idea, lo tashchit, not to destroy something. Again, our tradition takes that idea and says, well, what do we mean by destroy? Waste. The answer is that destruction comes through waste, from ignoring that which is clearly limited for our use. So it says, one may not cut down a fruit-bearing tree. This is from Maimonides, many years after the writing of Genesis, just a few centuries ago in our time. The besieged city for purposes of war, nor divert from them the water that they need, as it is stated that you should not destroy their tree. However, or whoever cuts them down is liable for the penalty of lashes. Whoever cuts down a fruit-bearing tree is in a destructive manner is liable for lashes. And then it goes on to say that it may be cut down for certain reasons, which we don't have to get into, but we understand trees as a resource. And then this is not only the case with trees. Whoever breaks utensils, whoever tears garments, who demolishes a building, who stops up a well, who willfully destroys food, violates the prohibition of not destroying. And it's now called Bal Tashchit. It's now called, it's this greater category that all destruction is waste, all waste is destruction. So we've been challenged to think about this in our own time. I just want to give a few very clear examples. Breaking utensils. Modern utensils are everywhere we look, from your plastic fill in the blank to the cell phone or the tablet you might be viewing this on. There's so much e-waste and plastic waste in the ocean. that we're destroying spaces that used to be wide open and mining spaces that used to be beautiful just to create more waste. I like to point out that every time they applaud and they put cool music behind demolishing some cabinets in a home, that there are homeless people all over this world who would happily take, cabinets that don't match your floors and build a home, fill their home with it. So when we think about all the ways that we are entertained by demolition, I want us to remind ourselves that we're buying into a system that tells us we have to just keep replacing things. And we're ignoring all the waste that's a part of that. And finally, and maybe this is silly, this is the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. One who willfully destroys food is a huge problem on all of our parts. It starts in small quantities, yes, by not composting, but also in just indulging in this sort of excess that is embarrassing. A third of all food produced goes to waste. 1 billion people on the earth are hungry, and 1 billion people on this earth are obese or unhealthily living. And so we have to ask ourselves how we can be brave about the actions we take, be bold in our solutions, and be creative about what it's going to take for us to really make a difference. I call it earth justice as opposed to environmental justice, because the environment for a lot of people is what's out there. Earth is where we live, and so it's really about how we give justice for the whole earth. So if you go to bit.ly/earth tzedek, TZEDEK, and enter your answers about ways that you want to move your own actions and acknowledge your own waste and call it out and sort of hold yourself accountable in some way.
Thank you, Rabbi Allenberg. Okay, my recyclers out there, it is time for me to pass it on to Ask Me Sasha, who's going to bring on our next guest.
Hi there. So I'm so excited to bring on our next guest from the Jewish Youth Climate Movement. Penelope Kopp is a rising senior at St. Anne's in Brooklyn, New York, and one of the founding members of the Jewish Youth Climate Movement's National Leadership Board. Penelope has always been passionate about environmentalism, social justice, and Judaism. She went to Eden Village Camp as a kid, where she came to appreciate and love the connections between the three. Since middle school, she has engaged with climate activism in many ways, attending marches and school walkouts, doing hands-on volunteering at urban farms, raising money for environmental organizations, learning about food justice and environmental policy in school classes and summer programs, and lobbying her representatives in Albany and DC to pass climate legislation. In the summer of 2020, Penelope attended the ACLU Summer Advocacy Institute. And this past fall, Penelope was a Biden 2020 campaign fellow, working 10 plus hours a week to get out the vote in Michigan. Please join me in welcoming Penelope.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Okay, well, it's so awesome to be here. This seems like a really awesome program. So I'm really excited to learn and talk with you guys about environmental racism, an issue that I'm really passionate about. And I'm not sure how much everyone knows about this issue. I think that we all kind of have different levels of knowledge. So I'm going to try and accommodate everyone's different background on this in relationship to the issue. If we could just go to the next slide. Great. Well, I just had that introduction. So actually we can go to the next slide. But yeah, I wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement, and I'm not sure how many of you guys have done this before, but this is a practice that we like to do in the Jewish Youth Climate Movement, just to, especially because we're doing environmental work, which is all about our relationship to the earth. It's so important to acknowledge that we are on occupied land. And, you know, the indigenous people that inhabit this land had a very different relationship to the earth than the, you know, Western capitalist ideals that have permeated this land and caused a lot of the climate crisis. So we just want to center ourselves. We're talking about climate justice that has to include indigenous sovereignty. And I wanted to share that I am currently on occupied Canarsie land. And I'm going to share something in the chat so that everyone can look up Or, oh, am I allowed to chat everyone? Maybe not, but I encourage you all to look up native land CA and find what land you're on, just so that you can see that. Yeah, okay, can we go to the next slide? Awesome. So first, just in case you don't know what the Jewish Youth Climate Movement is, we were founded last year by Hazon, which is another Jewish environmental organization. And we are a youth-led movement dedicated to mitigating climate change through action and empowering teenagers and, creating a more sustainable world within Jewish spaces and uniting to create a more just and sustainable world outside of those spaces. So yeah, next slide. Okay, and I think that as we heard from the last speaker, environmental justice is like a Jewish value, and specifically as it intersects with racism. The climate change, it's about justice for the earth, but also for humanity, because that's really what's at risk. And as Jews, we are taught to care and fight for marginalized communities. So next slide. Okay, next slide. Just a content warning. Okay, so environmental racism has historically been overlooked in the white-centric, consumer-based environmentalist movement, but it's essential to understanding the climate crisis. So, natural events can't discriminate, but systems and structures that determine how and when they play out, those do discriminate. So institutions and laws and companies deliberately target certain communities, particularly communities of color, for undesirable and harmful land uses. So Black and Brown communities and Indigenous communities often bear the brunt of climate effects because of this historic and current systemic racism. If we could just go to the next slide. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is first give a more factual analysis of environmental racism so we can learn about it, and then from there listen to some stories of people who have been impacted by environmental racism, so that we kind of have the more factual and then the more emotional outlook. So now I'm just going to kind of talk about different examples. So I wanted to start off by talking about our food system, because our food system is built around these giant food companies who keep their prices low at the expense of farmers, workers, neighboring communities, health, and our planet. And I've learned over the years that our food system is one of the leading causes of climate change. But it's also, our food system is rooted in colonialism and white supremacy. So last year in my history class, we studied Hawaii's founding. And it was actually about these food companies like Dole. I'm sure we've all eaten the Dole fruit cups, and they created their company and wealth by uprooting native land in Hawaii. And this has happened, all over the country. And it's pretty crazy that all these companies that we know of to get today, are only successful because they took native land and through enslavement. So that's the historical perspective. But how does this look today? Our food system, which looks to create cheap food, is harmful because now processed food is way more accessible than fruits and veggies. And we all know this from just walking down any street and, seeing fast food restaurants. But it's caused a phenomenon called food deserts, an area where there's no reliable access to enough nutritious and affordable food, which affects millions of people, more likely low-income individuals and people of color. So you can see these are neighborhoods that don't have grocery stores. They only have fast food restaurants or corner stores. And you can see here that unfortunately, the national average of household food insecurity is 14%, which is already so high. That's all those people who don't have access to fresh and healthy food. But a fourth of Black and 22% of Hispanic households are food insecure. A fourth, it's pretty crazy. So solutions to this have to be rooted in food sovereignty, the right of people to choose and produce quality food. Next, I wanted to talk about public health and pollution and waste. So laws disproportionately neglect, or government officials disproportionately neglect to enforce zoning and environmental laws in communities of color. And as a result, these communities are exposed to toxic and dangerous waste and factories and emissions and all these bad things in ways that wealthier white communities don't experience. So in my life, how this manifests, or just like in my city, there's a neighborhood that I read about called Mott Haven in the Bronx, where 97% of the population is Hispanic or Black. And this neighborhood has Fresh Direct factories, and I forget what newspaper, but maybe it's the New York Post. I forget the exact one. But a lot of factories in this neighborhood, which is actually crazy to read about because my family has ordered Fresh Direct throughout the pandemic, but all the ins and outs of the factories and all the trucks, there's so many emissions that the asthma hospitalization rates in this neighborhood are 21 times higher than all other New York City neighborhoods. In the same city, this one neighborhood, which is basically 100% people of color, have 21 times higher rates of asthma. So this has like serious detrimental effects on health. And just like this happens all over the country. I read in Houston, 100% of trash burning sites are in Black and Hispanic communities. And Black and Hispanic children have highest rates of asthma. And the really interesting thing is that these Black and brown communities that are bearing the brunt of pollution, they aren't creating this pollution. The pollution is mostly created by white communities. It's, if you look at like, just to bring back that example of Fresh Direct, the majority of like people who consume Fresh Direct are white people. And yet, yeah, so that's the public health and pollution example. Next, I wanted to talk about flooding, and also I just wanted to acknowledge, oh wait, can we go back? One more slide. Awesome. Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but we're gonna discuss in a second. So just one more example. So flooding, what neighborhoods are considered desirable, which is a term I use to call back to like historical segregation and redlining, which is basically just like banks not loaning to people of color to buy houses throughout the 20th century, which has caused like deep-rooted segregation and systemic issues. So this idea of desirable is also tied to how close neighborhoods are to the waterfront or close to sea level. So historically, Black and brown communities are much more prone to waterfront flooding, with white neighborhoods higher elevated. This has been seen in all the hurricanes in the past couple decades, with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans in the early 2000s, where Black communities were devastated at much higher rates. And in my life, Hurricane Sandy, which happened when I was 8, and I live in a pretty elevated neighborhood, and on my 3rd floor apartment, our power went out, but I didn't experience any flooding. But just a neighborhood over, much closer to the water, you know, entire houses were flooded. But now something also interesting is when waterfront houses are now being considered more desirable, that word again, now all of a sudden that white people want to move into waterfront houses. There are all these coastal resiliency plans. And this is all going to get worse as climate change intensifies the frequency and magnitude of storms. So now I just wanted to share a quick video of this one girl's experience with clean water.
We go out and pray for the water because the water is sick and it's contaminated, and we basically just do the water ceremony to pray for it, for hopefully one day that that the water's clean. My name is Autumn Pelche. I'm the Chief Water Commissioner for Anishinaabe Nation. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Manitoulin Island, and I'm currently living in Ottawa.
I'm doing this work as we can't just pray anymore.
We must do something, and we need to do it now.
Water is a basic human right. Everyone deserves access to clean drinking water, no matter what our race or color is, or how rich or poor we are. When I was 8 years old, I was attending a water ceremony in a First Nations community. I asked my mom to go to the washroom, and all over the walls said, "Don't drink the water, not for consumption, boil water advisory." And we had to use hand sanitizer after using the washroom. And I was very confused as to why it was like that. So I asked my mom, "What does all of this mean? Why can't we drink the water? Why can't we wash our hands?" And then she explained to me what all of it meant, what a boil water advisory was, and that the community that we were in has been on a boil water advisory for over 20 years. I visited a First Nations community, I think, last summer, and it's at Awapiskat First Nation. They're a northern community in Ontario, and I had a chance to speak with the youth there. And honestly, some of the things they had to say they were heartbreaking. They were really sad. One of the kids said to me that she feels bad that her grandparents, who are both over 70, have to walk every day 2 kilometers with buckets of water to get their water from a well that everyone in the community has to share. And honestly, that's terrible. Like, I went there, and you wouldn't even think that you're in Canada. They're living it, like I said, they're living in third world conditions, and we're in a first world country. It should not be like this. In 2016, I was at the Assembly of First Nations in Gatineau, Quebec, and I guess you could say I told off the Prime Minister when I was 12 years old. And that's honestly one of my like proudest moments that I constantly look back to, because I felt like I really made an impact when I spoke to him. I was told to not say anything to him, just to give him the gift. But there was something in me that, like, this is my opportunity to say something. So I took the opportunity, and I said, "I'm very unhappy with the choices you've made and broken promises to my people." And then he said, "I understand that." And then I started crying. He said he will protect the water. And so with that, I'm gonna hold him accountable to that as long as he's Prime Minister, because that's a strong promise to make, especially to a person like me. I like to say that's when you know something is wrong, is when a child speaks up. And that's when you have to do something to fix it, because we shouldn't have to be speaking up.
Before we close, I really encourage you to do some research on how this issue manifests itself in your own community, and try and figure out who the environmental justice activists are in your own community.
We really appreciate you bringing your passion for this topic and presenting for us today, and also just being an inspiration for all the other Jewish teens on this call, that your voice matters. You have a lot to say and can make a huge difference in this world. So thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you again so much. I'm going to pass it on over to Avram.
She is a rising 4th year at the University of Virginia. She is majoring in global security and justice, as well as medieval history. This is her 3rd year with YECA, the Young Evangelical Climate Action Group. I believe I got that wrong. As she spent her 2019-20 year as a project leader creating a community garden in her home church. She has also been a nature enthusiast and is an avid hiker. And she is very involved with just a lot of things revolving around Indigenous land rights, environmental racism, and responsible stewardship. Outside of her fellowship, she's involved with an honors committee, the University Judiciary Committee, and various Christian groups on the grounds at UVA. Wahoo wah. Let's welcome Lauren Kim.
I'm Lauren, she, her pronouns.
Lauren, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Before we start, I just want to say that I'm in a farm in Oregon, and I just want to give a land acknowledgement to the Yamhill and Tillamook people.
What is the land acknowledgement, and why would I want to do that?
A land acknowledgement is basically acknowledgement to the First Nations people who lived in the land you were in before. If you're in North America or various places around the world, giving a land acknowledgement is important for giving due respect and also understanding that we lived in occupied land.
Amazing. Thank you. That's new for me. I did not know that. So thank you for already teaching me something. And you're doing something really cool there. So just give us a quick synopsis of the program that you're volunteering for.
Currently, I'm on Elohe, which is an environmental and indigenous justice center. I'm doing a lot of farm work and just like working with the land and trying to build a deeper relationship with the earth, and also just learning about indigenous past, like the history of Oregon State, and what issues are present in indigenous communities as well.
Very cool. I look forward to learning from you what you learned during your time there in Oregon. I wanted to bring on you, Lauren, because a lot of times we have a lot of Jewish speakers and speakers from Jewish movements, and the Reform movement and the conservative movement are very care about the environment and talk about that. Rabbis talk about it in the sermons. And you come from evangelical Christianity. And from my very limited knowledge of evangelical Christianity, there isn't the overarching, like everybody's on board with that there's climate change happening. So far, do I have my facts right?
Yeah, I would say the bulk of evangelical Christians are on the fence or not really sure about climate change.
So you have an uphill battle with when we talk about circles of influence, with your circle of influence. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I would say like really big challenge overall is just like conversation with other Christians, especially evangelicals who are more conservative leaning and have a lot of skepticism around global warming. I would say like one of the first times I've had family invited over some of their friends for dinner, and they were kind of asking me about like what work I was doing, and I was explaining to them that I was working with a pastor who is involved with environmentalism in Boise. And these family friends, they were very conservative leaning and supported the coal industry. And it was challenging for me since it was my first time engaging with people who were skeptical of the science behind climate change. Or if they even believed in global warming, they didn't see it as a big of a problem. So it was really getting my feet wet in my first like instance of meeting people and having these hard conversations that of people who have different climate beliefs than me.
And you had told me about why it might be that evangelicals don't believe in climate change. And I talked about Greta Thunberg, where she was like, climate change in my country isn't a belief, it's a fact. So why would their Christianity be counter, like their belief in God and their Christian faith be counter to the concept of climate change?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple legs for it. So I'll go into like the three main ones. But there's this idea that only God can change the planet. Only he can affect the world on a global scale, and humans aren't capable or don't have that kind of power. There's also a very hot debate between dominion versus stewardship. So different Christians use different versions of the Bible, and in Genesis 1:26 to 1:28, it says there's the word dominion. Humans have dominion over the earth. And some people interpret that to mean that we can use all of our natural resources however we want because we're entitled to it. And other people read that as stewardship. You know, we have stewardship over this land. We don't own it. It belongs to God. How can we best use the resources around us? And then I would say the last kind of leg to all of this is the political tie of environmentalism to liberalism. And this connotation goes back to the 80s. And if I had more time, I would explain it in a lot more depth. But basically, before 1980s, hot button issues like environmentalism and abortion, these were not cut along religious lines. But because of intense rebranding and PR campaigns by conservative groups, and the tension between culture and faith at the time, today, American Republicans are very wary of so-called liberal movements.
So it's just all lumped into the category because of something we don't have time to go into, which we should learn more about, well, that's a liberal issue, climate change. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that God said, only God can change the earth. So the fact that if I believe in climate change, that means I believe that humans could be changing the world. And that goes against my belief system. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, how can we be better than God if God is the only person who can change the world on a global scale?
So you're this activist who actively seeking these opportunities, this pastor in Boise, you're now in Oregon, learning more, you're studying this in college. Have you ever been able to change somebody's mind?
Actually, yes. So I would say, I know I said the hardest conversation was with my host family, but I would have to say top 3 like hardest conversations was actually with my grandpa. And it's surprising because you would think like one of the hardest conversations would be with like a pastor or a politician. But no, just someone in my family. You were talking about spheres of influence in the beginning, and this is an example of starting change right at home. So my grandpa, he's a lot older than me, and he's very like religious as well. And when I was talking to him about environmentalism and what exactly I believed in, he pushed back on it a lot. And a lot of that came from his interpretation of our religion. So it took a long time, like speaking with him daily for weeks on end about what I believed and giving him phone calls and also just listening. I was able to have these hard conversations, and he changed his mind at the end. He was like, yes, like climate change is an issue. Like we should be responsible stewards of this earth. And like he started recycling and composting, which is good.
Wow.
So I'd like to believe that I made a difference there.
Amazing work. Well, since you're having so many hard conversations, and I asked you to make this slide to help us figure out how we could have these hard conversations with people. So I wonder if you could just, I'll put it up. Let's see, that's you. There's your slide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So yeah. Here, yeah, perfect. So here are some tips on having hard conversations. So if it's at all possible, try to establish a relationship with the person beforehand. When you establish a relationship, a friendship, a working relationship, conversation is much smoother. It flows easier and it's more honest. When you're conversing with a stranger, they don't know who you are. They don't know what you don't know. And there's a lot of miscommunication with intent. They also don't know you and they may be hesitant or suspicious. So it's easier to be rude with someone you don't have emotional ties to. And I believe that like vulnerability leads to more intimate and honest conversation. So try to have some kind of relationship with them beforehand. Setting ground rules before conversing. So that really depends on like who you're speaking to and the nature of your conversation. But some popular ground rules to have is, swearing or not shouting, keep an appropriate level of noise, or something about like where you are physically. So sitting across from each other or sitting on the same level. I want to approach each.
I want to just jump to the last one because we're going to send this out to everybody. But the last one says, love and respect the person. And that seems so hard. Like, if you don't believe in climate change, like, God, get out of here. Like, it's happening. It's hard to respect that person. Mm-hmm. So tell me, that seems like a really hard one.
Yeah. So it's so hard when you're engaging someone. It's so easy to be like, oh, like I'm so done with this conversation. I'm so frustrated. I'm just gonna burn this bridge and walk away. But it's important to like, at the end of the day, see this person as your friend, someone that you engage with, and have respect, and always say like, thank you for engaging with me and stimulating conversation. You can still say like, I maintain my belief, but like I respect you, what you're coming from, and hopefully we can have conversations like these again. And have that bridge of communication.
Amazing. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on. And I know you just got to Portland, so thank you for arranging your life so you could be with us and educate us about the evangelical Christian climate action movement. And I look forward to staying in touch with you and partnering with you in any way I can. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, friends, we are now bringing up for the last time of this year, our friends from Repair the World. And now, this is for the first time, we are bringing on the new Senior Director of Jewish Education for Repair the World, my good friend and an amazing educator, Rabbi Jessy Dressin.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. I am here to offer some actions of what you can do right now. Before I do, I want to just say one thing. I don't think Rabbi Allenberg referred to this text, but I was really struck, Lauren, by your reflection on the debate of whether or not people can make global change or only God can do that. And there is this midrash, which my colleague likes to refer to as the fan fiction of Jewish literature, that talks about when God created the world, that God took Adam and Eve around the Garden of Eden and said, look at all of this that I've created. This is yours. Do not forsake it. Do not waste it, because there's only one. And I've always understood that our role as human beings is to be in a sacred partnership with God and God's creation. And so I love the way that we riff on it. I also think that the big debate over dominion versus stewardship is because actually in the book of Genesis, we hear the story of creation twice, and we say dominion in one place and stewardship in another, and now we have thousands of years of debate. But that is not my purpose for being here today. My purpose is to think about what you can do now if you have found yourself interested in this conversation and want to take action. So 3 areas to think about: start at home, learn and get involved, and tap into your local community. So start at home. There are so many things that you can do, next slide please, that you can do right now and you can do before you're 18, and you can do in many cases from the comfort of your own home, that can have an incredible impact on the environment around you. And if you organize with your friends in your community, and if others do the same, it could actually really impact the direction that climate change is going. Examples of that are meatless Mondays. Maybe you are a carnivore and you like to eat meat, but even if you just took meat out of your diet one day a week, that would have an impact of global proportions if everybody in the world actually did that. Lights out days. It is summertime here in Baltimore, and I could probably go without turning lights in my house until about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And on weekdays, that's when I go to sleep. So consider when you're in your home, whether or not you actually need the lights that are on. And when you don't, you could have lights out days. Can also be fun if you're sitting around seeing how long you can hang out in the dark. Compost bins, planting oxygen-rich plants and pollinator plants. These are all things that you can do in your gardens and in the green spaces that you have access to that will help to develop green space, even in the most limited places that we have them. Attracting bees, we need more bees. We all need to work to attract bees to the places that we are living, and thinking about that which does not go into the recycling or the trash bin, but can actually be composted and go back into the ground to fertilize future produce being grown. Not sure where y'all live, but if you have opportunities to walk or bike when possible, and if you have access to public transportation, thinking about taking public transportation when it's available and as you're able to, all have positive effects on the environment around us. In our tradition, learning is so important. In fact, the rabbis say, which is greater, learning or action? And they say learning because it leads to action. You've already heard actually a number of the organizations that I would recommend, but you can learn more about the intersection of the environment and Judaism. You can consider participating in a Chazon bike ride, where there's a lot of really good learning and relationships that get founded there. In fact, I met Rabbi Adam Allenberg at a Chazon food conference many years ago. So lots of opportunities, not just to get involved, but to learn something. And read, ask, and explore. Become curious about what is out there. And imagine that when you sit down and you learn something new, it will spark ideas for you about what you can do in your home and your community. And lastly, take action and get involved in your local community. You can host an upcycle workshop or a yard sale or a clothing swap. Avram mentioned that shirt that he bought at the thrift store. If you can organize opportunities for people to prevent things that they are done with from going into a landfill, something that is no longer of use to you can be new and wonderful for someone else. Host a call party with friends to be in touch with your elected officials through Dayanu's Easy Step call process. Dayanu is a great organization on the scene right now, working in climate change through a Jewish lens. And don't think that because you are not old enough to vote yet, that you can't get involved in civic engagement and advocacy from where you are in amongst your social circle. And another opportunity is Diana is popping up circles all over the country. So if you're interested in connecting with other people who also care about the environment and care about climate change, you can find people in your community who are committing to learn and act together. The last thing that I will say, and I will pass it out back to Avram, is your generation is the generation that will say that climate and environment is its number one issue. At this point, I guess I am of an older generation and say with all my heart that I am grateful to you and count on you to really lean in and get involved, because it will require all of us to do our part and to coordinate with one another so that we can actually honor this sacred relationship that we as human beings have with the divine, which is to take care of this creation that we've been gifted and to treat it so that we will be able to enjoy it. And so will all of those who come after us for many generations to come.
Rabbi Jessy Dressin, thank you. You powered through that. You had so many great suggestions. We will be posting the suggestions in the wrap-up email and sending them out to you. Thank you so much for that. You can learn more about Repair the World, one of our partners, on their website or through their Instagram at We Repair. Friends, you can learn more about Tzedek America through our website, our social media, and our Spotify, and hear our music. Rabbi Adam Allenberg said at the beginning, "Aren't you like the trees? It is our job to speak for the trees." In Judaism, we see ourselves as partners with God. God needs us just as much as we need God. That's a partnership. And social justice is not something that happens in a day or in a week or a year or even 5 years, but we have to keep fighting the fight and not giving up. You have amazing gifts. You do. You have incredible gifts. You might underestimate them, but you have them and we need them. Use those gifts to make the world a better place. Okay, nature lovers, turn off your lights, open your windows, and fight the good fight. Bye-bye.